Okay, we're working with a particular distinction which we want to understand. And the distinction is between sorcery, magic proper, and holy magic. Now in saying that, these are a spectrum of things. So sorcery is wide within itself, and then it comes over and it bumps into magic proper, and where it bumps into magic proper, there's kind of a rite of passage, you might say, where the two sort of things intermingle. And then magic proper itself has this aspect in which it's got its own spectrum. And then you get into holy magic, and there's again a transitional state where things intermingle, and then you've got holy magic, which is in a spectrum by itself. So when I talk about these things, you need to keep in mind that you've got, say, 3 rainbows, and they merge into each other. Okay, so let's make some basic distinctions. In sorcery, if there's a manifestation or an application of powers, the operator, the individual who's engaged in the sorcery practice, does not really understand the connection between the manifestation and their activity. Now they'll know there's a connection because they have a rite or a ritual or something that they do to bring about the manifestation. Okay. Now let's take a positive example. A positive example would be Wicca. The Wiccans have traditions, and these are traditions from the goddess religions, and they do things that bring about manifestations. And of course, if you read, if you go to the movies, you can watch The Craft, or you can watch Practical Magic, and you can get various ideas, at least what filmmakers think Wicca is about. And also in these cases you have people with, let's call it, talent. But talent, again, is this set of rainbows of characteristics. Okay, so you can have people that are really incredibly talented and people that are sort of talented. And if you get into doing what I'm calling sorcery, and I'm not using it as a put down of Wicca, okay? Wicca is basically a religion, and it has certain practices, and one of the things that can happen as a consequence of these practices is manifestations. And for the most part, people who do Wicca don't understand the underlying laws by which the manifestations arise. Nor do they produce consciously the force required for the manifestation to arise. Now that's one of the distinctions between sorcery and magic proper and holy magic, is where does the force come from? What's its nature, and how are we mixed in with it? Okay? So people can do ceremonial things in Wicca, and they can do a kind of prayer, and at a certain level that prayer and petition thing can actually run all the way over, spread out into nearly into holy magic. But again, it's a question of the operator's understanding when they engage in the activity by which they seek the manifestation. Okay? And if the operator has degrees of unconsciousness and doesn't actually understand the laws that are involved in the producing of the manifestation, and it's more sorcerous than it is magic proper or holy magic. And I imagine in Wicca you have all kinds of mixtures of these different things because you have different traditions and different depth of understanding and so on and so forth, all these earth religions have a tendency to be a little bit on the side of sorcery because there's a disconnect between what the operator understands and the actual reality of what he's working with. Not always, okay? We're going to come around at this, and you're going to get confused, and I hope you get confused because that's why I use the word ambiguity. It's possible to be uncertain, and if you're going to be a scientist in your spiritual activity, you have to strive for certainty. You can't just mess around and hope something comes out okay. Now, one of the consequences, for example, of sorcery is that when someone does sorcery, in the sense that I'm talking about it, remember I'm just using the word to define a certain area of practice that leads to manifestations, okay? So these types of manifestations in which people don't understand how it is that the forces or powers necessary for the manifestation are actually working, the tendency will be that beings, invisible beings, will produce the manifestation, and these are beings with which the sorcerous activity puts them in contact, but they are not necessarily beings of the hierarchies of the right, shall we say, the beings of light, even though people think they're evoking beings of light. One of the common things that happens when you do this kind of shit and don't understand what the heck you're doing is you'll run into the fact that the beings of the hierarchies of the left and your own karma combine for the result that you get lost in a kind of cul-de-sac, because you've let your desire to have powers overrule your intellectual capacity to grasp the reality of what you're trying to do in any kind of scientific, that is clear thinking, objective fashion. And the beings that do this stuff, that bring about the manifestation, if you're practicing something that's in the rainbow of sorcery, they will draw the power to do that from you. Did you hear that? One of the ways to know that you've been practicing sorcery is that you're tired. It exhausts you. And depending on what's been manifested, it will exhaust you nastily or just lightly. But the fact is, for example, to distinguish sorcery from holy magic, if you do holy magic, you're not exhausted, you're uplifted when it's over. Because higher beings brought about the manifestation, and they did it in such a way that your contact with them elevated you. You're not exhausted, you're ecstatic. St. Teresa of Avila, who practiced holy magic, from a certain point of view, that's what we can call what she did, in her prayer life, was so ecstatic that, and people of course aren't going to believe this, but you can read the reports about her biography. It was not uncommon when she was in the nunnery for people to find her in prayer, and she's 12 feet off the floor floating. And then there's all the nuns that managed to live on nothing but water and the host for 25 years. Okay? All these phenomena are related together, but the fact is, holy magic lifts you up. It's a kind of ecstasy. Okay? Sorcery tends to make you ill, because you're working with a class of beings that, when they participate in the manifestation, they take the power to do that from you. More later.